Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad you all are here. I see lots of familiar names. Shout out to Emma, Janet, Jennifer, Joshua, Riley, and Claudia, and Shyla. I think a few more. Marissa, I didn't want to leave you out, but I wanted to say thank you, and we're going to get started in just a moment. But in the meantime, go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat box, say where you're from, so what organization you're with, what town you're with, and then let us know what you're doing for National Volunteer Month. So go ahead, take a second and introduce yourself, and we'll get started in just a moment.
I let a few more people in too, Dana.
Holly? All
Yes.
right, everyone, welcome. If you just arrived, we have a chat box question. We are introducing ourselves and saying how we're celebrating National Volunteer Month. So I see we just got a message from Emma, and this month she is trying to work with student organizations through WVU to get them involved in the community, and I love that. That is what National Volunteer Month is all about. So I'm going to keep an eye on your messages while they come in, and then we will get started with our slides. So, if you haven't met us before, my name's Dana Bryant, and I'm the Outreach Officer with Volunteer West Virginia. I help with this webinar, and today we are lucky to have a special guest. We have our Executive Director, Holly Carlson, and she's going to be helping with our training. So if you never met us before, it is so nice to meet you, and thanks for all your awesome introductions in the chat. I see we have volunteer coordinators from Kanawha State Forest to the Girl Scouts, all the way to Morgantown. So what we love about this webinar is that we're able to meet on a statewide level without even leaving our offices. So it's a plus. So welcome to our 2024 webinar series. We started this webinar series in COVID. We wanted an easy way to get connected, and it worked out so well, we've kept it around. So this is a free monthly webinar series where we explain our programs at Volunteer West Virginia. We network, provide training, and most of all, we have fun. So today is going to be a laid back training. We're going to have a lot of interesting content for you all. I always like to say that you get whatever you're meant to. So we're going to be sharing a lot of information. Just know you don't have to memorize all of it, but whatever you need will jump out to you. And we're going to have lots of time to meet all these great volunteer coordinators in networking sessions and breakout rooms. So there's a lot of great organizations. So you're going to want to stick around for that, and you'll get a chance to chat amongst yourself. We have some really wonderful topics coming up. If you haven't registered yet, be sure to sign up on our website for these upcoming topics. In May, we have a new topic. I'm really excited about this. We are working with Nikki from the Grant Advantage, and she made this webinar special for us. It's the top 8 mistakes made after winning the grant that jeopardize your chances for future funding. So a lot of the times it seems like just getting the grant is a huge task, but then once you get it, what do you do? So that's why we made this webinar. It should be really interesting. And this is going to be a 2-hour webinar. So you're not going to want to miss it. And then in July, we're having the Community Quilt Rural Volunteerism. And this is going to be presented by one of your fellow peers, Jenny from Heart and Hand in South Charleston. She's going to be sharing some tips. She has a wonderful volunteer program. So you're going to get to hear from an expert in the field. In August, we're going to be talking about project management, so how to manage projects and stay organized at your organization. And then in September, we have Get Ready West Virginia for National Preparedness Month. So we're going to dive into that too. So we have some really cool topics coming up each month. So sign up on our website so you don't miss them. And without further ado, today's topic is volunteer management. So this is in honor of National Volunteer Month. So thank you to every person on today's call that helps to make volunteering easy for West Virginians. We're going to be talking a lot about volunteer management today. We wanted to share that this is an abbreviated version of our full training. We've done this training for as long as a day or multiple days. So it's going to have all kinds of interesting information. We'll be covering a variety of topics and doing a lot of networking amongst yourself. So stay tuned for that. And now I want to introduce Holly. She's our executive director, and she's going to be sharing the content today. Hi, Holly. Welcome.
Hi, Dana. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and happy Volunteer Month. This training is going to give us a little touch of a bunch of major volunteer topics. And then if it really feels like it's helpful to you, you can always reach out to us and see when we're doing the longer version too, and do a deeper dive. My favorite part about doing this webinar training, though, is you all getting to chat with each other. You are volunteer managers, you're on the ground doing this work in communities in West Virginia. So I think it can be super helpful to talk to other people that are doing this work as well and share some best practices. So Dana and I always learn something from you every time we offer this training. So we're really looking forward to those conversations. So we're going to kick off with our initial module 1, which is called Build a Strong Foundation for Volunteer Involvement. This training is kind of broken up into 3 pieces. So the first section is called Build, which is going to be a lot of rules and regulations and requirements and just some best practices for starting a program. We'll talk a little bit in our grow space about growing your volunteers and how to get more, some recruitment. Recruitment's a huge topic. We always hear from you all that volunteer recruitment is the hardest part. So we'll spend some time there and we'll share some best practices with other people in the webinar today. And then we'll talk a little bit about some good practices for sustaining that volunteer program once you get it started. So those will be our big topic areas today. So for Build, our learning objectives are to set the stage for success with a clear rationale for volunteer involvement. We'll assess, prioritize, and manage the risks related to volunteer involvement, and we'll define roles and welcome volunteers from all walks of life. So that's what we'll learn in this first section. And we'll jump right in with setting the stage. So we're going to start at the very basics here, which are defining volunteers. So volunteers have a legal definition from the IRS. A volunteer is somebody who contributes their time freely and without coercion. So they're not paid for this. They're not forced into it in any way. They're not getting school credit. They just are there to be a part of your organization, help you reach your mission. And they don't receive pay, stipend, or benefits. So it is important to know that if you're giving gifts and things to your volunteers and that exceeds $500, then it is taxable income. So I imagine most of us are not, in a place to give more than $500 to your volunteers, but that is something to keep in mind, that once you've done that, you're kind of changing that relationship, and it is a taxable income for your volunteers. So this is our legal definition coming from the IRS around what a volunteer is. When we think about our volunteer program, you can go through a, kind of human resources planning process and thinking about your volunteers as well, the same way you would with thinking about staffing for your organization. Volunteers are really passionate members of your team, and they can add a lot of value. So we recommend really thinking about your volunteers in a strategic way, being really thoughtful about what they'll be doing. There's nothing I find more frustrating than showing up to volunteer and everything being really disorganized and not knowing who's my supervisor, who I'm working with, or how long I'm going to be there, or what you need from me. So if you really are thoughtful at the beginning with how many volunteers you can realistically use, what teams they might be working on, specific roles. So you may even want to have kind of short position descriptions for your volunteers that describe what they're going to be doing, thinking about how much what days you could use them. This is particularly useful if you're doing things like food banks or staffing a clothing closet. You would definitely know when people come and what days and times you need volunteers. Also, really important to know what duration of time. I think it's volunteers are going to want to know how long they need to be there so that they can plan their day around, the projects that you have. So being thoughtful and really upfront with your volunteers about how much time they need to commit. And then also for what talent. You're really going to want to get the right volunteers to be a part of your organization. I know we're really thankful as nonprofit organizations and, civic service organizations to have volunteers, but we really want to be thoughtful about what we need too, right? We want to work with volunteers that really add value to our organization and help us reach our mission. So it's good to think about who you need and what kind of volunteers you're looking for. When you think about your volunteers coming into your organization too, they bring a lot with them, right? They're not just a body to file paperwork or be there at your event. They bring in a lot with them, and thinking about that strategically and making use of their entire network is really helpful for your organization. Your really good volunteers are going to want to bring all their treasures and talents to your organization. And so thinking about all of the ways that they can help you reach your mission is a good way to think through, volunteers and how to use them. So volunteers are going to come in with social capital. This is, their network of people that they know, and they may know people that you haven't met before. One of the best ways to recruit new volunteers is through your volunteers you already have. They have a network of people that they know, and they may be people that you wouldn't meet otherwise, or who are not connected to your organization. They bring in human capital. So these are those talents, right? What things do we want them to bring in with them? How can they help us reach our mission? What skills do people have? And everyone's going to have some skills and some life experiences that they're bringing in with them as well. Cultural capital, I think particularly in rural communities, can be really helpful too, because people belong to cultures and they bring that with them. They bring their experiences and they know how to move through communities. So if you're having trouble reaching an area or reaching a community, you can find volunteers that have the right cultural capital to help you navigate that. So thinking about, what volunteers you may need for that and who you can bring in for that. And also your political capital is huge too, right? Like we all need things from the government. We need laws to be passed in our favor. We don't want to have to start paying taxes or something, anything could happen at the legislature. And with volunteer organizations, as nonprofits, we're state government over here, Dana and I, being able to lobby, you have a very limited amount of lobbying you can do. But your volunteers, if they're passionate about the work that you do, they can lobby as much as they want. They can call their congressmen, they can call their senators, and they can really make your case for you. So I think thinking about all of the things that volunteers bring in with them and all the ways they're there to help you reach your mission is great for your organization, but it also lets your volunteers really get involved with your work. So we would recommend thinking about all of those pieces and all the ways that volunteers help you out. So our favorite part about this is you getting to spend some time chatting in breakout groups. We're going to do 4 or 5 questions today like this. And Dana will put you in breakout rooms, maybe 2 or 3 of them. You're going to be in the same group for our whole 2-hour session today. So if your camera works and you're able to turn it on, I'm going to encourage you to turn your camera on and then introduce yourself. Where do you work? What are you trying to get out of today? Spend a few minutes doing that. And then if you want to spend a few more minutes on our question, and our first question for you all to chat about is a new problem or project that you have at your organization or you've dreamed up, and then how you could leverage volunteers to solve it. So if you want to chat about, what you're looking to do with volunteers in your organization and hear about what the other people in your group are going to do. And then I think we'll probably break out for like 15 minutes and then we'll come back. And then when we do more questions later, you'll be in the same group. So you'll be able to keep having this conversation and sharing and hopefully get to know each other a little bit over the course of the training today. So Dana, can you take us away into groups? And don't worry, we'll send this question out as like a little blast into the group so you have it too.
Perfect. So I'm going to send you all your invites. Go ahead and go in your room. This one will be a little longer because you're going to introduce yourself and then chat about your question. So I'm going to open the rooms and you should be getting your invitations now. Broadcast. Oh, you can broadcast your voice now. Did you know that?
I wonder what it sounds like. I haven't seen that happen. I hope it's not like a ghost coming into the room.
Let's try it. Hi, everyone. This is me, Dana. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, our question is go ahead, introduce yourself. You can start by your first name, starting with the letter A, and share your name, where you're from, your organization, and one new problem or project, and how volunteers could be leveraged to solve it.
You want to pause the recording till we bring them back?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Holly.
Unmute and share a little bit about your conversation. That would be wonderful. No takers? Did you have good conversation?
So this is Teresa Morris. So our group, we I guess took the question a little bit different. We talked about the problem of really having volunteers that are engaged and motivated to fulfill, in a sense, our needs and our mission. We seemed like we all had some trouble finding volunteers, engaging them, and sometimes getting them quote process, getting them through the orientation process. So our solution to that, we were all hoping someone had a genius idea, but we had some good ideas. So one was to set up, like a tabling event at more diverse fairs, expos, et cetera, just to kind of get a different perspective or a different population of folks to volunteer. And also just making sure that we're finding the right activity for our volunteers, finding an activity that they are vested in. And I think the word was going after that low hanging fruit, and starting small, maybe just having them engage for, an hour, and then trying to build that up. And then you might find a better match for the person. And that's all we got.
I think that's a great start. We'll keep talking about this. Recruitment is what we hear from you the most is difficult, finding volunteers. And when you get them, keeping them and keep getting them really engaged. So we don't have a magic solution, but we have some ideas for you. And hopefully your peers on the call will have some ideas too. Thanks, Teresa. All right, Dana, well, we can keep moving along. We have some little quotes as we go along. Volunteers want to be part of something bigger than themselves, not something that makes them feel small. Right? We're still in our build section, and we're going to talk a little bit of risk management, and then we'll get on to some more fun topics. But let's jump into a little bit of this for you. So we do get questions occasionally about risk management. Someone will call and be like, do I need insurance? Do I have to background check my volunteers? There aren't a lot of hard and fast rules on these things, but we have some recommendations for you. With risk management, you do anytime you're engaging volunteers or working with the public, particularly if you're working with vulnerable populations, you are taking on some risk for your organization. So when we think about risk management at Volunteer West Virginia, we're thinking about how do we reduce any possibility to harm or to your volunteers, to your employees, or even the reputation of your agency. We want to make sure that we would minimize any effects of loss. We also want to demonstrate due diligence. You want to be a well-recognized program, and you don't want some bad publicity or something like that to make people think less of your organization. We really want you to be an upstanding organization that's really demonstrated their due diligence, and we really do think this is all part of, achieving your organization's mission, is having these pieces in place. So you can kind of think about in terms of volunteer engagement, having a cycle. You're going to want to do your needs analysis, kind of your HR timeline we just looked at a little bit earlier. You'll go through your recruitment piece. You're going to want to make sure you screen your volunteers in some way. So that is risk management, making sure you have a screening process in place depending on, kind of what you do. We'll talk a little bit more about options there. You're going to want to place volunteers in a place where they're safe and where it's safe for them to be with your clients. You want to provide training. Training your volunteers is also an important part of your risk management, so they have the information that they need to be able to do the work that you want them to do. You want them to have a supervisor they can go to with concerns so that you're aware of any issues that are coming up and you're able to address them. And we put recognition in here too, because we love to recognize volunteers at Volunteer West Virginia. That's maybe a little tangentially connected with your risk management cycle, but we also think that's important. So this is always a cycle. You're always going to be kind of reevaluating how your process looks and changing it to meet the needs of your organization. So we kind of think of this as a circle. But as far as risk management goes, your screening, placement, orientation, and supervision are really, really important for risk management. This is a smaller circle for if you have episodic volunteers. So if you're just doing like event volunteers, you can actually kind of eliminate some of those pieces. So with an episodic volunteer, you're going to want to provide orientation and supervision, but you're not going to be doing the same level of training and background check and those kinds of things for a volunteer who's only coming for one day. So that's just the smaller circle. We don't want you operating on luck. We want you to have a good risk management plan in place. So we have some little templates on, kind of risk management. If you feel like this is like something you want to get into with your organization, or you just really haven't thought about where your risk places are. If you may already have some of these things in place. You may have policies and procedures, but if you're really at the beginning of this, we can send you some templates. We'll show you the pictures of them in the next couple of slides to get you started here. But if you are at the very beginning of developing a volunteer program, you're going to want to brainstorm places where you have risk. If there's no training for volunteers, if you don't have any insurance, if you're working with kids, those kinds of things are all things you're going to want to brainstorm those things. I would rate them because you can't do everything all at once. You're going to want to prioritize things and begin working through kind of your list. After you rate, you can kind of prioritize and start moving through them. And then we have some kind of risk strategies for you that we'll show you as well. So this is just a template we have. If you request the guidebook, Dana put this in the chat for you. If you want these templates, Dana can send you a guidebook that has all of them in there. And otherwise, you can just kind of make something up for yourself. But the first step, brainstorming, rating your risks here. On step 2. Step 3, prioritizing your risks here. So anything that's getting high priority from you, you're going to have to get to immediately. Stuff that's lower down your risk, you can spend some time kind of developing those policies to address those things. So you have options with risk management. You can't do everything. Volunteer managers are very busy people, and you're not going to be able to make there be zero risk, right? Like that's impossible. So there you have options here. Dana, will you just pull them all up for me? Yeah. You could avoid it, if you don't have those low things, that probably may not be where you want to spend your time with your risk management. You may look at other things and say, we need to modify this. A lot of organizations that work with children, you'll make sure you always have 2 people with children, right? So if you're noticing that sometimes you only have 1 adult with kids, a modification might be to say, well, hey, our policy should be to always have 2 adults in the room, or just things like that. Those are really simple modifications to how you operate. you can't get rid of risk, right? So some of it you're gonna have to live with. I worked for Big Brothers Big Sisters for a long time, and you are matching one adult with one kid, and that always is gonna have risk, right? So we're gonna buy insurance, we're gonna really vet our volunteers, we're gonna do background checks, we're gonna do interviews, we're gonna do reference checks, we're gonna check in with the family, and we know those mentoring relationships are really, really important. They're never gonna be zero risk. But we're going to do all the things we can because our mission is important and achieving the goal is important. So that some of it you just have to live with. And sharing is kind of an odd one here, but part of the way you share the risk is by having really good paperwork. So having volunteers and clients sign waivers, having agreements, having some of that paperwork in place will share or transfer that liability for you as well and set clear expectations, which is also a good risk management strategy. We'll talk about paperwork too. So we get a lot of questions about background checks, if they're necessary or if they're required. This is a sample from 2019 of from a partner organization of ours that does a big survey. And she surveys a lot of small nonprofit organizations to see, what are you doing to screen your volunteers? And it looks about 50 people are doing state background, 50%, 40% are doing national background checks. Credit checks are very rare, so that's not something we see a lot of. A lot of organizations, 42% will do a reference check. 60% do a face-to-face interview. There's some phone interviews. And what you may not have thought about, but is really widely done, is a volunteer application. So if you're new to managing volunteers, it's a great screening tool to start there. And depending on what you're doing, that really may be enough, depending on your mission and the risk of your organization. Having people apply may give you all of the paperwork that you need there. So we like referrals too. That's a lot like a reference check. Some people get resumes. That's not widely done. And then these are like some other ones at the bottom. But I think it's worth noting that only about half of organizations are doing background checks. So I think if you're working with vulnerable populations, it's really important to have background checks. But in other organizations, it may just be a barrier that you don't want for your volunteers. So that's decide in your kind of risk management planning, but that's kind of just an overview for you what those screening methods look like across organizations.
Yeah. And Holly, I just had a thought. I mean, I love the volunteer application because that's helpful for you, but it's also helpful for the volunteer. A lot of people want to help and they don't know how to help. So if you have an application, let's say you have a community garden, and then part of the application is, would you be interested in showing up once a month to weed or weekly to water the plant? Or you know, every day to pick produce. It kind of organizes people and helps them wrap their head around it. So if you don't have an application, it's a great way to not only help you, but help your volunteers. And you can just do a quick online form. It doesn't need to be like a job application. I just wanted to point that out there. That's just one really nice structural piece that if you have, it kind of helps point people in the right direction at your group. So it's helpful both sides, I would say.
Thanks, Dana.
You're welcome.
If you are going to conduct background checks, you need to get consent. That's a required part of the process. I would not be just running around background checking your volunteers without their consent. That does not make you a good partner. That paperwork is important. I would be really, really transparent with volunteers too about why you do it, what's the reason for it, and why you would not let them volunteer, right? So a lot of people are going to be afraid about a background check. You don't want people to feel nervous. Maybe they have a DUI from 20 years ago. I would tell people, the only thing on here that could possibly, make you not able to volunteer is if we find da 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 da. Like these are our rules, and these are the only things that would disqualify you from volunteering. You don't want people to feel like they're not welcome. So I would make sure you have a clear policy on why people can volunteer and why they can't, and to share that with people at the point where you're background checking them. You should have a specific process and treat everyone the same. It shouldn't be different for different volunteers. And as much as you can make volunteering open to the widest number of people, I would do it, right? I would work towards this equity goal of making it possible for anyone to volunteer, regardless of their background, as long as it's safe and meets your risk management strategy. So, in the spirit of, kind of trying to think through what's really necessary, you can think about various levels of background, of kind of this background checking or screening. What we would think of as like a level 1 background check would be a written application and an interview and a reference check. A level 2, if you're working with vulnerable populations and you really need a more thorough background check, written application, interview, personal reference, some kind of official background check, and potentially additional reference check. So there's a much more rigorous one if you need a rigorous one. So those are some examples. Again, there's no rules here. You're going to want to decide what works for your organization and what, keeps your clients and your volunteers in your organization safe. And yeah, we think when you do your volunteer interview, it's to get to know your volunteers and to kind of figure out how they can be a part of your organization, what they're bringing, this cultural capital, these additional capital pieces there. So thinking about that too. Okay, we're through the risk management. Any risk management questions? Sometimes things pop up for people while we talk about that. If anything comes to mind, you can always put it in the chat or you can send Dana and I an email and we're really happy to troubleshoot things for you too if things come up. And we'll jump back into the stuff that's more fun, defining roles and welcoming volunteers from all walks of life. So you all know, as you're working in West Virginia as volunteer managers, that we have unique challenges. In our state, we know there's a lot of out-migration, a lot of kinship care, a lot of older volunteers that are getting burned out and fewer young volunteers to bring into your organization. Transportation and social isolation can be really big problems in rural communities. Lack of internet access, or last week, tornadoes and people not having, power for a week. There's things that, we have that come up here that can make it particularly challenging for you and your recruitment. And so we're going to give you some time, Dana, if you want to pop over to our next question, to talk about this, because we know Teresa's group already got into this a little bit, some of the challenges they're facing with volunteers in terms of recruitment, and getting them through the interview process into the organization and into the right space. So our next question for you is, which are common challenges for volunteers in your area, and how can you better support the volunteers? So I'm sure you all have similar challenges you're facing. So we'll take about 10 minutes to go back into our breakout groups and kind of chat through some of the challenges you're seeing. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about ways that Dana and I know to kind of address some of this, and we'll see what you all think too.
All right, everyone. So I'm going to send your invite. You'll be in your room for about 10 minutes. So we'll be back at 2. This is a great question. This is one of my favorite ones in the deck. I think this is where you get some really great ideas. Holly and I did this training in Buchanan live. It was wonderful with a room full of people. And this was a great question. So be mindful to talk about your challenges, but also think about solutions, because you all are going to be the experts in the room. So I'm going to open your room and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
It looks like Karen and Livia need a room, Dana.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to put them in maybe room 3.
Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to send you all to room 3. It's quiet in there. They need some energy.
Anyone wants to unmute and tell us a little bit about your conversation?
We'd be curious to hear if anyone had a really good solution. Holly and I were chatting. I'll give you a second to gather your thoughts. I know you don't everyone jump in at once, but on one of our trainings, one of the solutions was to have a Facebook group where volunteers could share rides. So they would say, I'm going to the shelter on Thursday. Does anyone need a ride? And that helped with the barrier of transportation. So that was a really good idea we've had in the past, is having a Facebook group for your volunteers or just for them to stay in touch. It's really helpful. I know that works really well with different groups in the past. So does anyone else have a great suggestion you'd like to share?
Well, the only thing I was pointing out in our group is that the schools now have mandatory community service for most of their students, whether it's junior high, high school, or college. And I find that's a good thing to tap into and see if you can come up with projects where people can get those hours and help you at the same time.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it.
absolutely.
Jennifer, it's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while. That's a great suggestion. We love captive audiences. So volunteer programs, Rotary clubs, recovery programs. That's a great way to find a group of volunteers that you can capture and tap into. So that's a great suggestion.
And I'll add to that. I think for me, what has really worked, it's not necessarily been setting up at recruitment fairs or events so much as it is personal.
You're all done. Click the download in the top right to continue.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Just personal conversations with people and really just evaluating who you're talking to. And I don't want to say not prioritizing the application process or the onboarding process, but really learning about the volunteer, what their interests are, and then throwing traditional volunteer roles out the window and meeting that person where they're at and trying to build an opportunity around.
That's a great tip. Yeah, Krista runs a wonderful volunteer program. Krista, I didn't know if you were still around. I haven't heard from you in a few years. Can you tell everyone just where you're at? And you've been there for a while, and how many years you've been the volunteer coordinator?
Sure. So I've been at Sharp for July will make 10 years, and we have a wonderful program here. It's we've been really fortunate. We had a good base when I came in, but we've also the volunteers that we had welcomed me with open arms, and we've really focused on reaching out into our community. And COVID changed a lot of things for us. And unfortunately, we're sort of in I want to say a rebuild era here at our facility. There were some safety precautions that got put into place that really limited abilities for people to come into the facility. So the silver lining there is that it forced us to really focus on community outreach, community engagement. And boy, we learned a whole book of knowledge about what that looks like during COVID and post-COVID. So I will say that on the inside of the building, we've decreased in what we're seeing hands-on happening. But on the outside of the building, we've seen that just explode. People in the community want community-based projects, it seems, and they're very supportive. And it's actually helped with recruitment efforts. It's just that our program looks very different now than what it did, 5 or 6 years ago.
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, Krista is an expert in the field. She's been with Sharp Hospital for 10 years. That's amazing as a volunteer coordinator. And that's refreshing for me to hear that you all are in a rebuilding process, because you had an established volunteer program. And we had people on the webinar earlier saying that they've been having a difficult time recruiting volunteers. So it's nice to know that we're kind of in a shift. Everyone's in the same place. And like Krista said, they're just finding new ways to reinvent their program. I think that's nice for people to hear, especially from you because you've been doing it for so long.
And even an example of that would be, we had a literacy program, and prior to COVID, we had literacy volunteers that would come in and meet with patients one-on-one, and work on literacy goals. Obviously, COVID changed that, and we've kind of shifted that focus a little bit into things that we can feasibly do right now, which will be offer books and tools and resources. Even we have some volunteers that have signed up to help fulfill unmet needs. So if a patient requests a book and we don't have it, then I call upon those community-based volunteers and they go help find a solution. So it's been wonderful to watch that grow, but it is very different. It's forced me to grow in a lot of ways too. So yeah, it's not just the new groups that have barriers. It's our program's been in existence since the early 90s, and we've struggled too.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Krista. That's awesome. I appreciate it. I'm happy to see you. I haven't seen you in a few years, so thanks for sharing your wisdom. Yeah, Krista's wonderful. She's a great person to chat with. If you're a new program, I'm sure she would love to chat with you, and she has a lot of wisdom to share. So, anyone else want to pop in? All right, Holly, you want to keep moving on?
Yeah, I think Krista set us up perfectly for our next slides, which are about connecting with your volunteers and providing flexibility and learning about them, and ways you can do paperwork while doing that without letting the paperwork get in the way of getting to know the volunteer. So it can be really helpful to have flexible volunteer paths into your organization. A lot of times when we think about volunteers, we think about a traditional volunteer who's going to be, with your organization maybe once a week, comes to volunteer from 9 to noon on Mondays every week. But there are a lot of other types of volunteers that can be helpful to your organization. Sometimes a good way to get people in that doesn't feel like too much commitment is an event, or we like to call it an episodic volunteer. So someone who comes for one day, one event, one project, learns about you. And sometimes those volunteers can be turned into more, traditional or formal volunteers that are more connected with you. It's a little easier to be there for just one event or one short-term project. Pro bono or skills-based volunteers are also great if you need, some specific things. Maybe you need a marketing project, maybe you need a treasurer on your board. You can work with volunteers that have specific skill sets on projects as well. Service learning was mentioned, so you all are already thinking about how we could work with students and have a captive audience for projects that we need to do. Don't forget that your board is also a group of volunteers. So, recruiting good volunteer members. You can always have advisory councils and stuff too. Like Dana and I use some kind of ad hoc other councils as well, depending on what we're working on. And then you can also have volunteers working on campaigns as well. So in this kind of activism space. And some other ideas, employee could work with employers. You could get micro volunteering, which would honestly be something very, very small. Some volunteerism, gap years, mission-based, those exist too. We're not going to worry about them quite as much, but I think just keeping in mind that you can be very, very flexible with volunteer opportunities. So since we talked about risk management, we do think the paperwork is important. I think Krista put it really well for us, talking about, doing it and as part of the process, but also connecting with, the person and getting those things to work together. So you have to have risk management. We really, really recommend having some paperwork, but you don't want it to get in the way of building relationships. So you want your paperwork to be focused. You want it to increase clarity about expectations and roles. So if you're developing something for the volunteers, having clear, simple position descriptions, clear, simple rules, clear, simple, handbooks. If you need to collect data, that may be something you're using paperwork for. And again, we're we're definitely really interested in this due diligence and risk management. We want people coming into your organization, particularly volunteers, feeling like you're a reputable organization, that you've thought about your program and you've thought about, your clients as well as the volunteers and how to take care of all those people. So this due diligence piece is important. And then we don't want it to feel overly bureaucratic. So you don't want to give them, 30 pieces of paper to sign right away. That can be really overwhelming. Try and stay away from that. So from our end, these would be maybe our recommended types of documents to have for a volunteer program. Some kind of volunteer fact sheet or interest form, or maybe a conversation, like a planned kind of meet and greet over coffee, but some way to learn about what your volunteers are interested in. We have a little sample volunteer interest sheet. Something you could do is like a Google form too, when people apply. It could be part of your application. But some way to really gauge your volunteers' interest and learn about them. Having some kind of position description, really, really helpful. And when we say position description for volunteers, we're not necessarily talking about a job description, but just something that really clearly and excitedly tells, kind of people what they'll be doing. And if you can include impact statements about what impact they're going to have. So this, for me, I always think about like food banks, where your position description would be like pack 18 boxes of food, or da 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 da, and then they always tell you when you're leaving the food bank, like, you packed enough boxes to feed 300 seniors this week. Like, you leave knowing what you're accomplishing. So something that connects the work with what they're doing to help the community, and that is short and to the point. And then we think an interview is a really good idea too, if that works into for your longer term volunteers, not necessarily like an episodic volunteer, but for your, longer term volunteers, your kind of traditional volunteers, having interview questions that help you get to know them. You should have some kind of application form. If you're doing a background check, making sure you get consent for that. We highly recommend having a volunteer agreement with your expectations. So not all volunteers are great volunteers, and it's really important to be clear with them what your expectations are for their conduct while they're with you. And then if they're not doing, kind of what you need them to do, you can point back to this agreement, right? Like, you have someone maybe who's just being rude to other volunteers, or they're not showing up on time, or whatever it is that is essential to your program, kind of laying those out in an agreement, having your volunteers sign it. And then if you have a volunteer that's just not meeting your expectations, you can pull that out and say, hey, it's really important that you do these things. We told you what they are, you're not doing this. What can we do to help you achieve it? So, and then if in the unlikely event you have a volunteer who's really not a good fit and you need to kind of ask them to leave, you have a process to go to the same way you would with any kind of job or employment. Also, if you have volunteers that are under 18, get parental permission, please. Some other ideas for kind of onboarding for these longer term volunteers. A volunteer manual can be really helpful. It gives people a place to kind of look up their questions. A training plan and orientation. The orientation, again, is a risk management tool, having a way for people to know kind of what your expectations are and what they should be doing. And then in terms of retention, having some kind of satisfaction survey that you do periodically can be great too, to hear from your volunteers, and you can kind of implement things that are not working well for them, or keep things that they really enjoy. It can help you really get some good data on what's working well. So this is just a sample volunteer interest sheet. If you get the guidebook from Dana, there's a template in there, so you could just steal it. This can really quickly, you could ask these questions too. You wouldn't have to give it to people as a piece of paperwork. It could be the questions you ask them, when you meet them for coffee or something, and you could really learn what they're excited about.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I think, and the last question, please don't ask me to, is a great question. To learn what people don't want to do and what they do want to do. I always say when you have a volunteer, it's like making a new friend. So they're not like robots, they're like people, and you have to learn what people want to do and what they don't want to do. And just like what Krista said, you want to meet people where they're at and have them share what they're passionate about. So this is simple and easy, but I really think it's a great resource.
So this gives you some things you can include in your volunteer position description. It's a pretty long list. I'm not going to get into all of them. Also, I don't know that you need every single thing on here, but some goals, kind of the impact of it, some basic responsibilities so they know what you're expecting. Volunteers love time requirements, so they know how much time they're going to need. Everyone's busy, so being really clear about what the time requirement looks like, where it'll be. Work environment can be helpful too if it's something people aren't going to necessarily know what it's like to come to volunteer with you for the first time, if that's relevant. So like, do you need to wear closed-toed shoes, or is it cold? Should people bring a sweater? I think depending on what you do, that may be something you want to include in your position description. If there are any skills and qualifications that you need, you want to keep these as simple as possible. You don't want, like qualifications to be a huge barrier, but if there are specific things that you absolutely need, you can include them. I think it can be helpful to tell people what the training requirements are, specifically if maybe they have to complete, a certification before they can start or something, or even just what that orientation might look like. Making it really clear who they should reach out to. So who's your supervisor, or who's the person you should reach out to find out more. If there's perks to volunteering with you, I would definitely put those. I'd highlight those and say what you're getting. And how to apply. So what is the action steps? If you're going to go through the trouble of creating this description, putting it on your website, putting it on our website, we would love to advertise your volunteer positions for you on our portal. Making sure that it's really easy and quick for people to follow a link and then apply to volunteer with you. So they're not running around trying to figure out how to get in touch with you. If the easier you can make it for them to submit an application or connect with you, the better. And again, we'll just say, kind of trying to keep them really, really simple. You don't want to have a huge list of skills that people need to have to be a volunteer with your organization. Just some basic skills. You can put them on any position description. You might think about people skills too. Those don't necessarily come to mind for us first, but you may want to point out in your kind of skills section if it's really an extroverted type activity where they're going to be doing a lot of engagement with people, you might want to say that. Or if maybe you need social media skills or something technical, that can help people get a sense of if the position's a good fit for them. So volunteer agreements, once you've found your volunteers and found out what they're interested in and convince them to hang out with you and volunteer with you. The volunteer agreement is a great document. It's great for risk management. These are just your basic things you're going to want to include on it. So start date or end date, if those contracts renew, what those days look like. Clear expectations. So what do you need them to do? When do they need to be there? You can put waivers on there. So again, this is part of your kind of your risk management pieces, like some very simple policies and procedures and release waivers, even things like photos. If you want to use their photo, you can include a photo waiver in your volunteer agreement. And then if you have insurance, I would go ahead and let people know what kind of liability insurance you have and what it would cover in that volunteer agreement too. So they have all that legalese in there. And it's just a good risk management practice. And then I like a volunteer handbook, depending on the scope of your program, what you're doing. It may be more paperwork than you want, but it does have all the information in one place, and it gives people a place to look for the answers to their questions, some place to start before having to always ask you for everything, because you're busy volunteer managers with lots of volunteers. So if you're able to put together a small volunteer handbook, even if it's like 5 or 6 pages, and just gives them the basics, that can be really, really helpful. So it looks professional. It's a reference tool in line with your volunteer agreement. Again, it can have, this pieces of disciplinary process. If you happen to have a volunteer who's really not a good fit, they've been given the expectations, and it helps you have that conversation with the volunteer. In order for volunteers to give their time, the experience must be worth their time. So this is, again, just a kind of a overwrought way to say what Krista told us, which is you need to get to know your volunteers. The process of doing the paperwork shouldn't get in the way of that relationship building and create an experience that is really a good fit for your volunteers.
Yeah, and just to build off that, Holly, sorry to interrupt you, but we had a great suggestion in the chat box, and it was from Krista. If you all saw all this paperwork and it felt like overwhelming and daunting, just know that maybe you just open the door to get people in initially. So Krista said they have a community service night project, and then people come in and just for help for one night. So some of the examples she gave was wrapping Christmas presents for patients, and there's no participation requirements for that. So maybe you just do a one-time small event where people don't have to fill out paperwork or do the manual just to get them in the door, and it kind of opens the door. And then once people get established, that's when you give them the more robust training and the manual. So that was a really great suggestion from Krista, and just something you can do, hosting a community service night to get people in and help with your outreach, so they kind of meet you and they understand what your organization is about, is a really great first step. Because then they'll be excited and they'll want to fill out your paperwork the next time.
All right, making the case for volunteerism and its unique value. We're getting into the more recruitment pieces. So it can be really helpful to think about why people may want to get involved with your organization. And not all of these are just going to be because your mission is so important. Your mission is really important, but people have other motivations for getting involved too. So it may just be how they grew up, how they were raised, their family always volunteered, and it feels like a part of what they do, and they want to be involved in the community. Sense of community. Some people need places to belong, and your volunteer group can really create a space for people to belong and build relationships. We talked about service learning and requirement. We don't have a problem with mandatory volunteerism. It can be a great way to get volunteers and have people come into your organization. Some people are intrinsically motivated and they really value community, so it's just they feel good by coming to volunteer with you. And then you'll also have people that are kind of showing off, right? Like maybe they're running for office and they want to come volunteer your organization and look like they're engaged in the community. There can be a really wide range of reasons why people volunteer with your organization. This, I think, understanding all of these motives for people, this duplicates the other side, the previous slide a little bit, but some people volunteer because it's their values. Other people volunteer because they want a place to go and to build relationships. Sometimes your volunteers are going to be looking for career prospects, so maybe getting some little experience or service learning. Volunteering can be a great way to learn new skills and abilities too, or get references for jobs. We talk with people in AmeriCorps all the time. They want to change careers, and so they kind of volunteer to do AmeriCorps for a year so that they get the experience they need to do that. And then honestly, volunteering can enhance people's lives, right? Like give them these other things they have going on in their life. So recruitment. This is always everyone's favorite topic. We'll give you kind of some of our suggestions, and then we'll go into breakout rooms, and you all will have more ideas to share with us. You always do. But we find that personal networking can be a great way to find volunteers. You have awesome volunteers already that volunteer with you, and the best volunteers are going to be their friends that they invite to come help out.
Sorry, Holly, but Valerie from Davis Health Systems, they make their volunteers buttons. And then the buttons, they wear them around town. Do you remember, Holly? And they say, I volunteer, ask me how. And she says, since she's made those volunteer buttons, they've gained like 10 new volunteers. I can't remember how specific, but people see their friends wearing the buttons and then they want to volunteer. So that's a great tangible idea you can do. And I think she said the buttons were maybe $2 a piece. So I just had to put that in there because I love the Refer a Friend campaign. Maybe you have a day where you have your volunteers bring a volunteer with them. It's just a really great way to get new volunteers.
Special events. So Krista gave us a great example of this. Too, I mean, there's tabling, but also like a volunteer event where people just come to wrap presents, right? Like something very simple. They get in, they get to know you, and it doesn't require all the paperwork. Public presentation. So this, I mean, presenting to classes, going to info sessions like Rotary clubs. You can present at a Rotary club about your organization. Classrooms. So these kind of, kind of presenting to a volunteer group. And you can always post online. We are happy to host your volunteer opportunities for free on our website. We do kind of a statewide advertising campaign too, directing people to our platform. There's also any number of other ones to use as well. So, there's always a place for those online posts as well. All right. So we are going to have you go out in breakout groups again for about 10 minutes. Whenever we do this, people have great ideas. So the buttons, last time we learned about the buttons, I'm excited to hear what you all share as the recruitment methods that work the best for you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm so impressed. No one left. That touches my heart. You must have really loved your workout rooms. And that was the last one of the day. So I just wanted to give you all a thumbs up for that. It looks like everyone's returned, Holly.
Excellent. So we hope you had really good conversations and maybe made some new connections. Dana and I would love to hear your best recruitment method. This is always everyone's favorite question. So if you have anything that we haven't mentioned that you do, or even something we have mentioned that you find really effective, we would love to hear about it.
We participated in a community event, a tabling event for a community, and we have a lot of Casa swag that we put on our table. The last community event that we did, we had actually donated our koozies that have our Casa logo on it. Of course, you don't have to necessarily use it as with the beer, but you can, but there's a beer garden. We weren't encouraging alcoholism or anything like that, but it's, you guys are laughing, but it was a good hit because once people got that koozie, then they're like, oh, it's got Casa for kids on it, and the people that weren't familiar with what we do, they came over and talked to us. So it was a nice little swag or whatever that we have.
That's great. We think volunteering should be fun. So okay, sorry, who else?
So we have swag so far. That's a great recommendation. We have fortune cookies that we use as swag that directs people to our website to find volunteer opportunities. That's really cool. You can buy your own custom-made fortune cookies with your website in the middle. So that's another good idea if you want to get your name out on the street. And I didn't want to cut anyone else off. Did someone else like to share an idea?
I'm going to go ahead and share another one that we did at our gala is our biggest fundraising event. And we had our second annual gala at the Botanic Garden this year. And of course, I hate to center this discussion around alcohol, but it was an open bar. So as a little gift, we had given everyone pepperoni rolls at the end of it with our logo on it and our information and how you could reach out. And I just feel like it was water and pepperoni rolls. And I feel like it was a good ending to that event.
I love that West Virginia spirit. You
Yeah.
all have the best stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing your ideas.
Sure.
I'll throw something out. Something that I think that works really well to recruit is actually, and I think it was mentioned earlier somewhat, but I think we get our best results when we actually speak in front of a group and do a presentation directly to groups. And I think it was mentioned like with Lions clubs, meetings and things like that, but we have spoken to groups like that. We are lucky enough to be in Mon County, so we're right here at WVU near the campus. So we get in front of a lot of student groups, even classrooms. But any group settings like that you can actually schedule a time with, even if it's via Zoom. But in person is much better. You can do, even if you do a PowerPoint presentation or not, and whatever you can directly to them, get names, emails, phone numbers directly from them and send applications to them directly and communicate to them. We get a lot more recruitment that way. Rather than we do get recruitment from tabling events and things like that, but when we're one-on-one talking to them about the volunteer opportunities and our organization, we get a lot of attention and that way, I think.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's a great tip. And I think that touches on how people are feeling. People are looking for a human connection right now and a way to connect with their neighbors and have commonalities. So if you're in front of a group, I feel like you're going to have a 50% more chance of finding a volunteer because they already know you, they know what you stand for, and it's a great way for people to feel connected. So that was a great tip. Thank you.
I will say I've found success when I have to go speak at those storytelling. Hands down storytelling. You can put all the information up on that board, and we certainly want that up there, and we want to take them to take it with them, but they're going to walk away remembering the impact story, the personal experiences. So I think that's an important component as you're going out to speak and recruit. It's worked well for us anyway.
Absolutely. Krista's a great storyteller. I still remember some of your volunteer stories. She's had a few volunteers receive Governor Service Awards. So you're right. I didn't even think about that. When you tell a good story, it makes people automatically kind of connect to what you're saying. And I think naturally most people are storytellers. So that's a great way to make your program come to life.
Right. Well, we're going to close it out with some recommendations on recruitment posting and how to sell your volunteer program, make it sound exciting. And then it will be 3 o'clock and you'll be on to the rest of your day. So
Let's see.
Oh, there's more left than I realized, you guys.
Holly, did you want to breeze through these? These had some interesting stats.
Sorry, I forgot about these ones. Yeah, these we like because they're from the 2021 Commission for the Community Service Nationwide Community Service Survey that CNCS does. It gives you a sense of like how people in West Virginia specifically view volunteering. So we're 40th among states in volunteering, with 28% of people saying that they volunteer with a formal group. But we have really high rates of people kind of engaging in other ways. So 23% participate in local groups or organizations. 97% of West Virginians will say they've regularly talked to or spent time with their friends and family, which is high. Like loneliness rates are quite high in places, and our level of kind of engaging with other people here is very high. And 25% of people in West Virginia will say that they do something positive for their neighborhood or kind of informally volunteer. So we talk a lot at Volunteer West Virginia about this idea of turning informal volunteers into formal volunteers. We know that people in West Virginia are helping their neighbors and connecting with their friends and family regularly. That's just a part of the culture. So, trying to think about how do we turn those people into kind of official formal volunteers with our organization. Oh, there's the neighbors one. Okay. Let's skip these. I want to hop up over to the
Yes. Okay, here we go.
The talking points. Yeah, sorry. So, Dana and I at Volunteer West Virginia, we're always talking about how to make things simple. That's always, Dana will tell us that here all the time, how important it is to make things simple and understandable and easy for people to access. We work for the government, so I think it's almost a full-time job here to take what the government gives us and make it accessible for regular people. It's important to us. And I think it's important for you to think about too with your organization, because all the jargon, and you're into the mission and you know what's going on. And the regular people out there that might care about what you do are not going to have all of those pieces. So it can be kind of a constant struggle to create things that are simple and easy for people to connect with and make them want to be a part of your organization. So we have our little formula for a really simple recruitment posting. It's something you might put on our website or another volunteer site or on Facebook, or you could print it, put it on community boards. Something that lists the community need really quickly at the top. Easily tells people how does someone volunteer or provide a solution to that need. How can they make you all be successful in achieving this mission? What is the commitment? Is it one day? Is it 1 hour a week? And then really important, how do they sign up? And then who do they contact if they have questions? So paragraph or a couple of bullets, and you're just ready to go and you can use it everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And this is great for a website or posters. When I was an AmeriCorps member, my two best places to share a poster with something like this was the post office and the library. So making a poster, a flyer with all this information, that was my best place to find volunteers, and doing presentations at women's clubs or Rotary clubs. So all of this, once you have your information organized, you can go out in the community and help disperse the word.
Yeah, Crystal suggests QR codes, a link to a website, whatever gets that's great. So with your recruitment postings, we want them to be super short. We know people have short attention spans and they're busy, so I wouldn't use more than 100 words on a recruitment posting. One opportunity per listing. I know sometimes you have, kind of 8 positions open or something specific, but if you can make your recruitment postings simple and only be one thing, it makes it a lot clearer, a lot easier for people to see. If you can make it visual, not necessarily just like your logo, but pictures or something that can help people connect with what you're doing. You want to accurately describe the task they'll be doing as much as you can. You'd want it to be upbeat and exciting, something that makes people want to connect with you. Again, not more than one listing on the what to leave out section. Leaving out acronyms. I know all of us have so many acronyms. I feel like we're always trying to get rid of them. And make it feel like we don't want people to be reading this and feel like I have no idea what you're talking about at all. I know you have great outcomes. You probably collect data on the work you do. This isn't really the place for that either. Your mission statement probably isn't going on there either unless it's really short. And you definitely don't want to put a bunch of rules and paperwork they're going to have to do on the bottom of your recruitment posting. So leave all that out too. We've got a couple of samples of these. I like this one because who wouldn't want to adopt Paloma? I think these kinds of posts are really quite easy for organizations like, pet rescue centers. The dog pictures are so cute. There's a very clear call to action at the top. At the bottom, it really shows you how do you get there? How do you adopt Paloma? This link is on the bottom. You can see it right there. What they're looking for is very clear. We need a foster. the commitment is there as well. So I think something like this is a good example of what we're talking about with a compelling recruitment posting. And then there's one more example on the next page. And this is, like disaster response, a disaster response posting on that one. So, what do we want you to do? We want you to help us, prepare the community for anything. This one's really short, actually, which I kind of love that they've got it all in one paragraph, and it's super short. And I think all of the information that you would need is here, except for there should be a link somewhere telling people how to connect with you. It's only missing that. But how do you apply? How do you connect it? Get connected piece. Another thing you may want to do is testimonials. This is kind of the same reason why it's so good for your volunteers to recruit other volunteers, is that word of mouth, those testimonials. So if you do some kind of satisfaction survey with volunteers, you can always have them give you testimonials or little like sentences you can include, or if you have really great volunteers, you could just meet with them and have them give you some pieces. These are some questions you could always ask volunteers if you have trouble getting good quotes and testimonials from them. Why did they join? How does volunteering with us make you feel? What's surprising about being a volunteer with us? What's challenging? That can be a really good conversation starter too. Things that began as challenges might really become what made them feel successful as a volunteer. And what might you say to someone who might consider volunteering? Another question. So these, you could include one or two of these in a satisfaction survey. You could, have coffee with a really great volunteer and ask them some of these questions, and then you'd be able to get some of these testimonials you could put on your website or share to help kind of make those recruitment posts a little more exciting. And that is it. We did it. We got through it in 2 hours. Does anybody have any questions on anything else we can answer for you while we're here? We got a few minutes left.
I have a question, and this kind of is a strange question. Do you guys have any resources? You talked about risk management and some of the behind the scenes things that volunteer groups deal with. Do you guys have any resources or companies or connections that deal with some of those things that might be willing to give nonprofits some, free advice, or at least offer some additional resources that they could explore?
Great. So does Volunteer Pro have any of this? If you've never been on Volunteer Pro's website, they have really good resources. I'm not sure they necessarily have those because I haven't checked, but I mean, she has lots of stuff like that on her website.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've never talked about that, Krista, but that gives something for us to think about. I'm going to put Volunteer Pro up. I don't know if this is kind of what you're thinking about, but like sometimes we have a board member that's a lawyer. Is that kind of what? So then you have legal advice, a volunteer providing legal advice. Does that kind of make align with what you're thinking?
And we try to diversify our board, but what we've run into, aging population. So our seasoned folks have, aged out or, stepped aside, and we had younger folks come in, and you're trading, it's a trade-off. So you're trading, some revitalized energy, but they don't necessarily have the experiences. So I'm just looking ahead, looking to see, what resources might be available to help, especially volunteer board officers, become more comfortable, educational tools, that type of
thing. Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot, actually, Krista, is how to get board members involved. We thought about having a webinar about that to kind of, so I think we're thinking along the same lines. I don't really have any answers. Holly, did anything spark in your mind?
You know what else might be good is a community foundation. Community foundations will often do these that kind of board member training for free. And I know it feels like something they might have good connections with people that are interested in that. And like I know Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, the program officers there here in Charleston are really great. But Krista, where are you at?
I'm at Sharp Hospital in Weston, and we work with the Friends Auxiliary. That's our nonprofit group.
Oh, okay.
But I also serve on a board as a volunteer with the Senior Center, and the Senior Center and the Family Resource Network. And I know with the Family Resource Network, they are struggling for board members. They dealt with an aging population too. And then the Senior Center, they have people in positions, but for example, the person that they have on their board that deals with the policies is an elderly gentleman, and he was trying to write a policy on cell phones, and that just it wasn't working. So just looking ahead, additional resources to help new people coming in feel confident with those types of positions. So I'm kind of asking selfishly on that one, just because it's going to touch other areas of my life too. I just wondered what might be floating around out there.
I mean, from our point of view, we do have an application online, a Google form that people apply through. And then a volunteer, like our volunteer board members, we have a handbook for them that kind of goes over the organization and expectations. They sign conflict of interest documents. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a learning curve. We have been talking about this here, Dana. We've got to get this training together on like board member recruitment and board member training because we've started to hear this question a lot, Krista, and I would love to bring an outside expert in, kind of make a free webinar for you all on that. So it's a great suggestion for us on what to add.
Yeah, I think too what would be helpful, just looking back over the 10 years that I've been here, we went through a period where people weren't really sure as far as the nonprofit side. What are all of the requirements? The reporting, the responsibilities. So you can't really find all of that information in one spot. It's trying to piece it all together. So when we had people stepping into a role like a treasurer, if my position hadn't have been one that has been here with the state for a very long time, I don't know that they would have had that type of guidance. So I think something to help nonprofits maybe understand, or nonprofit boards, I think it's all interrelated, but to understand what are the requirements, what are the boxes you need to check off.
What are maybe some best practices too? I love this idea. We'll think about it. I think it's a great direction for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there somebody maybe within legal aid that could help with some of that? Or maybe the Chamber of Commerce is in the communities. Those would be places I would maybe start to get some advice on some of those.
That's a great recommendation. I love legal aid. That we could reach out to them for our potential training. Those are great thoughts. Even if we don't have the answers for you all, I love this because we do this training series every year, so we can add on a new webinar. So it's super helpful to hear what you all need and kind of what you're looking for. Any other thoughts or recommendations? I'm taking notes. All right, well, I just wanted to do a brief commercial before we wrap up here, Holly, and then I'll let you finish any final last words. I see this is very random, but who helped us develop this training is Volunteer Pro, and I know we just mentioned them, and I was on their website, and they're having a really interesting webinar. It's called How to Become an Irresistible Magnet for Today's Volunteers. It's free. It's Tuesday, April 16th and Thursday, April 18th. How to Become an Irresistible Magnet for Today's Volunteers. So I think that's really cool. Builds on some of the questions you all had. I'm going to put that website in the chat box. So you all want to sign up? I'm going to sign up, and that might help you all with your volunteer recruitment. So I wanted just to do a brief commercial because I saw that pop up as I pulled up their website. And Holly, did you have any final thoughts before we close out the meeting?
I just want to say thank you all for coming today and engaging and being a part of the breakout rooms. Happy National Volunteer Month. Dana and I love to hear from you. So if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call and reach out. And we love to hear your suggestions or answer questions you have or send you things. We'll do our best to get you connected in any way you can. And I know we're past 3 and you're all very busy. So we'll get you out of here. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We're so happy with how today turned out, and we'll see you all next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.